any vegetable that comes from the earth, they encourage you to eat it.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast is brought to you by Mack Weldon, smart underwear for smart guys. Use the promo code LOFB for 20% off your order. We're here, we're talking fantasy basketball. We're looking at Sunday's action, just the 4 games on, so not a lot to really look at there. We're then going to look at, or actually we're going to start off by previewing the week ahead, looking at ways to set your weekly roster, looking at guys to stream in and where the streaming opportunities lie for daily changes leagues. And then we'll head into Monday and preview the DFS action for all 11 games that are going to be on Monday. So
let's get to it.
All right, let's do that, Michael. We'll start off by looking at the weekly games and talking about the week that's coming up in fantasy basketball. A weird week with lots of jam-packed days. Monday we've got 11 games. It's a pretty full day. Tuesday we've got 6. Probably that's the sweet spot. That's the sort of day that you want to really get a grasp on everything, really set good DFS lineups. That's a really nice day. Wednesday we're back up to 10. Getting pretty chockers. Thursday down to 6. A couple of years ago when we were talking about Thursdays, we were talking about 2 games. Now we're getting 6 on a Thursday. Friday, we've got 9. Saturday, we've got 10. Sunday, we've got 5. So, in reality, there are only 3 days this week where you can target guys and know that you're going to have empty spots on your roster. Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Anything that's above 9, I look at and go, in majority of cases, you won't have a spare roster spot. Now, in your situation, you may. You may definitely have one. Like for me, I know in some of my leagues, on Wednesday, I've got like 3 roster spots spare, even though there's 10 games played. And on Thursday, I've got like 2 spare, and there's 6 games played. It's always dependent on who you've got on your roster, but we're looking at Tuesday with 6 games, Thursday with 6 games, and Sunday with 5 games as the key days to really target in terms of streaming. Let's look at weekly leagues now. The Warriors play 5 games this week. That's great. You're probably ready to pat yourself on the back and go, look at this, I've got my Warriors, guys. But we have to be aware that they're playing 5 games for a start, which you are, clearly. But they're playing these 5 games, and 4 of them are back-to-backs on the road. So, do they play them all? Does everybody play them all? I think this is a great opportunity, if I'm Steve Kerr, to consider taking a guy out, taking Draymond out one day, taking Durant out one day, Curry out one day, Clay out one day, and it's still going to leave all these guys with a 4-game week, but it's not necessarily going to make them these brilliant 5-game start options. Now, we don't know any of this for a fact. Kerr might not limit any of them. He might play them all 25 minutes a night. I think that's probably unlikely, but they do have some pretty tough matchups coming up as well, the Warriors. And yeah, I said 4 of them on the road, and they have the Clippers, Utah back-to-back in the middle, and then Memphis, Minnesota to end the week on the road. So there could be some concern with these guys not playing their 5 games. It doesn't really change anything for what you do weekly-wise, because you're still going to put them all in your lineups. It just might not be the exact bonanza that you're anticipating. As for 4 games, there's lots of teams that play 4 games. 23 teams, in fact, play 4 games this week. The Celtics, the Hornets, the Bulls, the Cavs, Mavs, Nuggets, Pistons, Rockets, Pacers, Lakers, Grizzlies, Heat, Bucks, Wolves, Pelicans, Knicks, Magic, Sixers, Suns, Blazers, Spurs, Jazz, and Wizards. And then we go to the not-so-happy part of the schedule, where the Hawks, the Nets, the Thunder, the Kings, and the Raptors, they all play 3 games, and the poor old Clippers play 2 games. So it's not necessarily going to be easy to put guys from the Clippers in. DeAndre Jordan, I don't think you want to put him in with 2 games. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, yeah, look, you can make an argument with those guys, but it could come down to a fact where with so many teams playing, or 24 teams playing at least 4 games, that you could have a guy that's a 90 ranked player that's playing 4 games, or Chris Paul that's playing 2, including one of those games against the Pelicans, which they might find as a comfortable victory, and he plays 28 minutes. So it's all going to be individual preference, but guys, Paul and Jordan's out and Redick's out, obviously, but Chrissy Paul and Blakey Griffin, they may not they might not be even worth owning. No, phrase that. They'll be worth owning. They may not be worth putting into an active lineup this week. So it is definitely something to consider and to look at. In terms of ease of schedule, Denver's got the best 4-game week in terms of ease of schedule. Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Washington, they're all pretty fantasy-friendly teams. Whereas then the last one's the Magic, which is not so fantasy-friendly. On the flip side, you look at the Timberwolves, they play the Spurs, the Raptors, the Pistons. Horrible fantasy matchups, and they play the Warriors. The Bulls, the Hornets, the Sixers have got poor matchups as well. And on the good side, it's the Spurs, it's the Nuggets, as I mentioned, the Wizards and the Jazz. And the Magic and the Mavs have decent schedules as well. So again, not all 4-game weeks are made equal. They're not all made the same. And that's a point that I hammer home quite a bit, because it is important to know that. Now, when we look at daily changes leagues, there's decisions we're going to have to make, because as I said, there's the 3 days where you're going to be able to utilize these streaming options. With the team that has the best streaming schedule for the week is Philadelphia. They've got games on all 3 of those light days, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. So getting these guys in for the Sixers, it may help. They've got a Tuesday, Thursday back-to-back. You might look, okay, I can't fit anyone in Wednesday, I can't fit anyone in Friday, I can't fit anyone Saturday. You add a Sixers guy at the start of the week, you get 3 games for 1 addition, because they play on all 3 of those days. So that can be really useful. Up the top, I said that Denver's got a really fantasy-friendly schedule, but only one of those days comes on a streaming day. They play Monday, Wednesday, both 11 and 10 games, and they play Thursday and Saturday. So Thursday, you can slot the Nuggets guys in. Second half of a back-to-back on the road is not ideal, but the other days, not so great. The Mavericks don't play 1 game on a day where it's limited games played. Same as the Bucks, same as the Pacers, same as the Rockets, same as the Cavs, same as the Hornets. So streaming guys in from those teams, when you look at it, they play 4 games, let's add them at the start of the week, it might not work in your favour. The teams you want to look at who are going to help you in that respect, the Spurs, the Wizards, the Jazz, they have 2 games that on friendly days, same as the Warriors, the Pelicans, the Suns, and the Bulls do as well. And when I talked about the Sixers having 3, the Timberwolves also have 3 as well. So they're the 2 sort of premier streaming options there are. Now, when it comes to streaming, it's not just about quantity of games, it's about when those games are. So talking about who's got the back-to-backs. And back-to-backs aren't necessarily as important with days like this, because they might have a Monday, Tuesday back-to-back like the Spurs, but there's 11 games on Monday. So that Monday guy, sure, it's a back-to-back, but he won't be in your active lineup. What you want to look at is the pseudo back-to-back, the Tuesday-Thursday, and which teams have got that combination. There is a few of them. The Spurs, the Wizards, the Jazz, they all have that combination. The Grizzlies have that combination as well. The Sixers, as I touched on already, the Bulls, the Timberwolves, they all have that Tuesday-Thursday pseudo back-to-back, and that's clearly handy. And then we want to have a look at the teams that have a Thursday-Sunday, because Friday-Saturday, we're talking big quantities of games, and again, if you look at a Thursday-Friday back-to-back, or a Friday-Saturday, which is a nightmare, that you might only get 1 game out of them, so it's not a real 2 for the price of 1 of your weekly waiver additions. You want to look who plays Thursday-Sunday then, where we're talking about the Warriors play Thursday-Sunday, so that's a bonus for them at the end of the week, although there's not a huge amount of fantasy value on that team outside of the studs. We look at the New Orleans Pelicans. They have a Thursday-Sunday situation. They've also got a Saturday-Sunday back-to-back as well, if you can squeeze someone in on that Saturday. You've got the Sixers, as I touched on earlier, and the Timberwolves who've got that Thursday-Sunday combination, and that's it. So your beneficial streaming, your bonus streaming, as you can probably refer to it as getting that extra game for 1 less transaction, it's limited. Everyone else, it's just going to be, what stats do I need? Let's add him for a game. Let's see how the matchup's going. Let's see who they're playing and all that sort of situation. So there is definitely a lot to look at. If you want to look at it in more detail, we've obviously got the schedule analyzer on Basketball Monster, and you can check Matt Smith's weekly article as well, talking about weekly leagues and daily leagues in terms of how best to attack the schedule for the week. And that's what Matt does in that part, or in that article that he writes every week over on Basketball Monster. All right, let's take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, and that is Mack Weldon. It's a great time for Mack Weldon because we're coming up to Christmas, and sometimes it can be pretty hard to buy presents for people like your brother. your dad, your partner, your mate, anyone, whoever it is, your KK at work, or whatever you call it in this Secret Santa. Mack Weldon can get you guys covered. Now, what is Mack Weldon? It's comfortable clothes for men. It's underwear. It's t-shirts. It's hoodies. It's activewear. It's socks. I just got back from the gym and I was wearing the Mack Weldon socks at the gym today, and very comfortable. No-show socks, really short ones. Very, very happy with my Mack Weldon products. And the underwear I've been wearing as well, fantastic stuff. I highly recommend you go to Mack Weldon. It's MackWeldon. You can get orders in now and you can get them done and get them ready for Christmas, and you don't even have to worry about it. And you don't even have to tell these people that you're going to be saving 20% by using my promo code, which is LOFB. Mack Weldon has smart designs. The fabrics feel fantastic. They're very comfortable, and shopping is as straightforward as it gets. It's online shopping. Pick your stuff, put it in the cart, ship it out, done. I don't think that's hard to do at all. They've got a great range of things, very comfortable gear. I haven't bought the hoodies yet. I'd like to get I heard the guys on Locked On Celtics talking about the hoodies, and Jay said he swears by his. I've just got the underwear, I've got the socks. I bought some socks for my son actually over on the site too. So lots of stuff you can do for kids, for adults, anyone in your family who you're looking for a gift for. Go to Mack Weldon. You're getting quality products, you're getting them at a cheap price, and no hassle. The other thing is, if you don't like the products, Mack Weldon will refund you, and you get to keep it. I don't really see that there's absolutely no downside to placing an order. You can order it and say, you know what, let them know, I don't like it. And so that's fine, we'll give you your money back, just keep the product. And that's exactly what they'll do. And there's, again, absolutely no downside to doing that. So check out MackWeldon.com for all your comfortable lounging gear, your activewear, the underwear. Fantastic stuff over at Mack Weldon. Love my stuff that I got from them. I'll definitely be going back and ordering more. So check out MackWeldon.com, but use that promo code. Get 20% off using LOFB. Very, very straightforward. Let's talk about the monstrous line of the night. Boogie Cousins. He's been pretty good this season. I reckon that's a fair comment. He's had some efficiency problems, and that was an issue coming into the season, that there might be some of a concern there. But another huge night from Boogie, 36 and 12. He hit another 4 3-pointers. He had 4 assists. He had a steal. He had 3 blocks. He went 9 of 30 from the field. That's not great. 14 of 16 from the line, though. So that's a huge percentage on a huge volume, and that could possibly have swung your free throw percentage this week in a matchup. So he does have nights like this. He's currently the 6th ranked player over the last 2 weeks. In that time, he is averaging 34 and 12. Yes, he is averaging 34 points in his last 6 games. And he is hitting 3 triples a game. Over 3 triples a game. 1.3 steals, 2.3 blocks. I'll talk about 1-1 guys. He's a 1-2-3 guy. 1 steal, 2 blocks, 3 triples over the last 2 weeks. It's a small sample size, but it's ridiculously good. 45 from the field and 70 from the line on 27 and 9 attempts. They're not ideal. The free throw percentage is a worry. It's a negative over that time. On the season, though, it's only a minor negative. He's at 75% and he's at 46 from the field. These are not positives, but they're not negatives. In fact, the field goal percentage Z-score is negative 0.07. So basically, it's bang on. It's a average. It's not hurting you. It's not helping you. The free throws is negative 0.58. So that's not fantastic. It's clearly not a punt situation, though. A punt situation is when you're a negative 2.5 and negative 3, that sort of an area. You can easily return from that sort of numbers from Boogie. Putting up some great numbers, looking fantastic. I'm pretty happy that I invested in him with a late first round pick in 1 or 2 leagues. He's really repaying it at the moment. There's always going to be some concern with... people looked at Boogie in the preseason like, I don't want to draft him because you'll get texts and you'll get suspended. That just doesn't factor into my thinking at all. He might miss 1 game. Look, he probably will get suspended at some point, but he'll miss 1 game. But you can't control that. Pretty much everyone is going to miss 1 game down the stretch. It's almost impossible to avoid that. That's just going to happen with basically every player, bar maybe 1, maybe 2. It just doesn't factor into my thinking with Boogie. So he's going to get too many texts, and it's not like he's going to get suspended and miss 6 weeks, or miss 2 weeks, or miss 8 games or something like that. He misses 1 game at one point, and I understand it can be frustrating to have one of your players miss a game, but it doesn't factor too much into my decision making. But being fantastic, Boogie, and it's great to see a guy start ramping it up again even further, which is what he is currently doing. The waiver wire line of the night, Brandon Jennings. 19 points for Jennings, 2 triples, 1 rebound, 3 assists. Hit all 7 of his free throws. He went 5 of 7 from the field as well, Jennings. A pretty nice night. He played 26 minutes in a game with Courtney Lee out, got some extra run, played next to Derrick Rose, who played 34 minutes himself, and then Justin Holiday, who was the starter, who played 30 minutes in the last game. He played just 23 in this one. And that was what initially I thought. I thought they would give Jennings more time next to Rose. It didn't happen in the first game, but as is pretty much standard for Jeff Hornacek, whenever there's some sort of disruption, he just seems to alternate things depending on how things are going. And it definitely worked in Jennings' favour today if you happen to own him or play him in DFS. I am starting to get questions on Brandon Jennings. Do we add him in leagues? Well, he's a top 130 player over the last 2 weeks. He's 160th on the season. And on the surface, that doesn't scream must own. But as per usual with Brandon Jennings, he's not shooting the ball well. 40% on just 6.7 attempts in these last 2 weeks is not good, but it's not terrible. But the benefit of Brandon Jennings is 5 assists a game, over a steal a game, and a 3 a game. And that can be very useful. We know how hard it is to find any source of assists off the waiver wire. So a backup who, in probably the worst possible role he can have is what he's currently doing. He's giving you 5 assists. If Lee remains out longer term, if Rose gets hurt, if Holiday goes down, if any of these other guys go down, then we might see an extra 2 minutes for Jennings, and then we might see an extra 1 assist. And then you go to 6 assists, and then it becomes even more valuable. And he can get bunches of steals, and he's a good free throw shooter, and he can hit threes as well, albeit at a very low percentage. So far from a must-own type of guy, he's a guy that can be owned under the right circumstances, with the right team, facing the right needs. If you're looking for rebounds and field goal percentage, you're not going to get it from Brandon Jennings. That's just not what he does. But to fill a void in assists, it's fine. He is playing some decent ball. He's playing some decent games next to Derrick Rose, and then that gives him scope to improve when Rose happens to be out, which hasn't happened yet, but at some point, he's not. If Derrick Rose plays 82 games, I will be very surprised. At some point, he'll miss, and you'll get an extra boost out of Jennings. You own him, he's probably going to be your 13th best player, so far from a must-own sort of guy, but definitely a categorical specialist that it's not easy to find specialists in off the wire. So that's what makes him so appealing. We're going to stay, or should we? Yeah. Let's stay with the New York Knicks for now, and let's talk about the young gun of the night.
Percentages.
Yep, absolutely. Kristaps Porzingis, 15 points and 14 rebounds. His shot has been off the last 2 games, but 6 of 18 from the field, but he added a 3. He had 4 blocks, and he hit both of his free throws. Very, very hard to complain about that sort of performance from Kristaps. He's been tremendous this season, no doubt about that. Just hovering outside the second round with a ranking of 26th. He's 20th over the last 2 weeks. And the thing that was sort of holding him back at the start of the year were his block numbers. He was shooting a great field goal percentage, improved 3-point percentage, great free throw percentage, and his blocks weren't there. Well, what's happened over the last 2 weeks? Well, his blocks are at 2.9 a game, and his field goals have dropped down to 43%. So he can't get both of them happening at once. But when they do, then we're talking about a top 15 guy that when he gets that field goal percentage to, say, 45 plus, and he gets his blocks at 2.5, which he could comfortably do. As I said, he's at 3 a game over the last 7. That's how many total blocks? He had 20 blocks over the last 7 games. It's a lot of blocks. And then he shoots at a higher percentage. We're talking, he's averaging 21 and 8 already at this time. We could be talking about a guy going 23 and 8 with 2.5 threes, with 2.5 blocks, and then you're clearly pushing that top 15 zone for Kristaps. It really taken a huge step forward, fueled by the extra minutes, which is great that Hornacek has done that because he was mismanaged at times by Kurt Rambis last season, putting up some really, really fantastic numbers. And if you own him in any sort of dynasty or keeper format, I reckon you must be absolutely thrilled, because if you grabbed him last year, you probably grabbed him at pick 100 or something, and now you're talking about a guy that looks like he's going to be a perennial top 15 type of player with that really unique skill set of being able to contribute in blocks, threes, and potentially both percentages and points and rebounds. Just lacking a little bit in the steals and assists, and if the steals come up, then man, we're going to be looking at a ridiculous type of fantasy contributor. If you want to hear more about either Kristaps Porzingis or Brandon Jennings, listen to Locked On Knicks. Jared Dubin hosts Locked On Knicks. You should have heard of Jared Dubin before. I'm sure you have. You know who Jared is. He is a Knicks fan who covers the team and writes about basketball, I believe, for Vice Sports at the moment. So check out Locked On Knicks. He'll have all the information about what the situation is with Courtney Lee's injury, how the Knicks are continuing to play that, what's happening with the center rotation, how horrible has Joakim Noah looked for this team. Lots of stuff to talk about with the Knicks. So Jared Dubin has got all that covered over on Locked On Knicks and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, as this podcast is covering every team in the NBA and in the NFL. Let's look at the dud of the night. Aaron Gordon. It's not a terrible dud performance, but on a night where only 4 games are on, he gets it. 10 points for Gordo, 3 boards, nothing else. No threes, no assists, no steals, no blocks. He was 50% from the field. He was only 50% from the line, which is a little bit of a concern. And yeah, look, we know he's struggling. But the positive there is, and I guess it's a positive and a negative, is in his last 4 games, he's scoring 12 points a game. That's more than he scored all of last season. 12 points a game. Almost a 3 a game. Shooting 57% from the field. Great positives. The negative is only 3 rebounds. No steals. Half a block. 50% from the line. And despite the fact that the shots are going in, he's only playing 22 minutes. So that's the concern I have with Gordon, is that the shot, which was horrible to start the year, he was talking about 36, 37%. He's got it up to 41 now based on this little hot streak. He's rectified that. The shooting's there. But now the defense has fallen off, and he's not getting the minutes. So that worries me with Vogel, especially with Jeff Green actually playing a very good game today. And the team, I guess, starting to look a little bit better after they were horrible at one point, after they made that switch. Now they've made the switch back. Gordon's back in the starting lineup, and it's working for them, but he's not playing the full allotment of minutes. And that's a concern. He's ranked outside the top 200 this season. Over the last 2 weeks, outside the top 300. And even with this slight resurgence with the shot going in, he's still outside the top 200 over these last 4 games. So Aaron Gordon in standard leagues, I guess it depends on where you're sitting, but by no means is he a must-hold sort of guy. Just because of those things that I said. You know, the shot's back, but the minutes aren't. The defense isn't there. And you know, if you're languishing, if you're sitting 6th or 7th, 10th, then there's no point holding on to someone who might come good later on in the year. You're going to start needing to get production now. We're into December. We're 5-6 weeks, or not 6 weeks. This is week 7. We're into the 7th week of the season. So there is not a sense of urgency, but we're talking about, for a fantasy point of view, like a third of the way through the year. You've got to start making up ground. And unfortunately, it's not pointing in the right direction, despite some of the form corrections that Gordon has shown. It's not pointing in the right direction for him at this point, which is unfortunate because I do think he's got potential and he has been misused at times this year, but it's just not happening for him at the moment. Let's get into these games now and talk about them in a little bit of extra detail. The first one is the Orlando Magic. They're taking on the Detroit Pistons. I've got to talk about Serge Ibaka because he wasn't great to start the year. I think we all know that, but he's flying at the moment. He's a top 20 player for the last couple of weeks. 21 points here, 7 boards, but it's 4 assists, 3 steals, 4 blocks, 2 triples on 9 of 11 shooting contributions right across the board from Ibaka, and he's playing very well. Now, can he maintain top 20 value? Look, if someone offered me a top 20 guy back in return, Porzingis, someone like that, I would take it immediately because I'm not 100% convinced that Ibaka can keep it up. But the change in pairing with him with Biyombo more is helping him. It's helping him to put up some better numbers. And if Vogel's unlocking lineup combinations that work for this team, then more power to him and more power to Serge. Really a great bounce back, in fact, from a guy that was literally horrible to start the season. And some of that has to be attributed to joining a new team, but it's happening for him at the moment. Nick Vucevic continues to come off the bench, and we saw him do this last season where he did play off the bench and still put up big numbers. 16 and 8 with 2 blocks in 28 minutes. Of course, we'd love him to get 33 minutes or so. But this is why Vucevic was a guy that that I'd look to target in the 70s or 80s. Because I was worried about how the minutes would go down. I knew he could still produce in 27 to 28 minutes, and they wouldn't be able to completely limit him and play him only, say, 21 or 22. But I didn't think he was getting the 31 or 32 that he would need to be that top 30 sort of player. But getting it done, continues to score big, get big rebounds, and blocking some shots as well. So good night from Vucevic. Jeffy Green, 30 minutes for Jeff. 14, 5 and 3 with 2 triples. This is good Jeff Green. We've seen good Jeff Green over the last 4 or 5 seasons, I guess. Pop his head in occasionally, but it doesn't last. For now, with the way that Vogel's running the rotation, with the way that he is playing, he's not a 12-team league guy, but he's a definite 16-teamer, and he's a 14-team consideration player. But I feel this is illusionary Jeff Green. This is what he does, and he's just as likely to have 4 and 2 in the next game in 25 minutes. So don't get your hopes too high here. DJ Augustine outplayed Lord Alfred Payton, which is probably the first time that he's done that since the benching of Payton. 12 points with 2 triples, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. I think that Augustine's in that Brandon Jennings class of guy. Jennings gets more assists than Augustine. And despite the fact that Augustine is the starter, he's not getting 30 minutes. He's not getting 32 minutes or anything like that. So he's a borderline 12-team league guy, whereas Lord Alfred Payton, a struggle here, just the 23 minutes, 8, 4, and 3. He'd been okay, though, prior to this off the bench, but far from being a must-hold sort of guy. Jody Meeks has also worked himself into a pretty significant role. 16 minutes for 7 points. That's only deeper league stuff, but it's taking away CJ Watson's minutes, CJ Wilcox's minutes. Mario Hezonja's an afterthought now as well. So Meeks gets that deep league appeal. Evan Fournier wasn't his best night. 5 points on only 7 shots. Had the 3 steals, hit a 3, but not his best performance. Well, Bismack Biyombo, 30 minutes for Biz, 5 and 7. A steal, a block, the 4 assists. That's very high for Biyombo. A specialist. The rebound, shot blocking type of specialist. That's all he is, far from a must-own guy. The Pistons, a pretty disappointing loss after some big road wins for them. Marcus Morris started off the game ridiculously hot, cooled down a bit, but still ended with 21 and 5 with 5 triples and 2 steals. But as is usual with him, when the shot falls, the numbers look great, but it doesn't happen often enough, and he doesn't do enough in the other areas generally to mean he is a must-hold sort of player. He's absolutely fine to own, but I don't think he even has top 100 upside, and he's playing a lot of minutes. And if Stanley Johnson ever figures anything out, then we're going to see Morris lose 1 or 2 minutes. But that with Stanley Johnson, that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. He played just 1 minute today. Reggie Jackson's back, though. I buried the lead. He is back. He looked great. He played 23 minutes, 18, 1 and 4 with 2 triples. Reggie Jackson owners, this is it now. It's time for you to make your charge. Ish Smith owners, it's time for you to say goodbye, most likely. 25 minutes for Ish. Straight back to the bench he was. 11, 1 and 2 with some pretty ridiculous circus-type shots for Ish. But with Reggie back, playing 23 in the first game straight as a starter, you're going to see Reggie go to 26 or 27, back to 30 within a week, I would imagine. And Ish is going to come down to 20 or 19, and that's not going to be useful. He then falls into the Brandon Jennings, DJ Augustine, maybe add for 12-team league type of player. He's been playing very well lately. Ish, very much above his head. Let's see how he runs in that second unit. But it's not going to be a guy that's a must-own, must-start sort of a guy. Beno Udrih also takes himself, well, he doesn't take himself, he gets taken out of the rotation completely. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, not a great shooting night, but 9, 9 and 4. Good to see he's still got the assists going with Jackson there, and he's been upping his assist rate, which may fall when Jackson comes back. Doesn't mean you drop him by any means, but there might be a slight dip in what he's able to do. Toby Harris struggled, 11 and 4. Well, Drummond had a very low-end double-double, 10 and 10, but the 3 steals, the 2 blocks is pretty nice for the end of the week, or Johnny Lua triple-1 in his 26 minutes, and that role is just not changing. That is exactly what he does. More a 14 than a 12-team league guy, I believe. All right, let's look at the next game, and that is the New Orleans Pelicans and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Tony Davis, 43 minutes, 37 and 15, 2 steals, 4 blocks. Huge numbers. The field goal percentage wasn't quite there, 14 of 32. That's not a great way to end the week as a Davis owner, but everything else, we can't really complain about him. He almost nabbed himself another monstrous line of the night, just putting up the big numbers there. Drewy Holiday continued to start. This was the most minutes that Holiday's played since he's been back, so I think we can feel comfortable that his minutes restriction is over. 36 minutes for Drew. 10, 5 and 7 with 2 steals. Not a great line, but 4 of 12 shooting impacts that. We talk about if he hits 5 or 6 of those shots, then it's a 14, 5 and 7 and looks a lot more appealing. But he started and Timmy Frazier went back to the bench and Etuan Moore joined Drew Holiday in the starting lineup. Frazier on the bench played 16 minutes and was 0, 4 and 1 with 2 steals. He probably won't be that bad moving forward, but the fact that they moved him to the bench, that they are playing him as a backup point guard means that his 12-team run is done. Terrence Jones, 9 and 7 in 25 minutes. Fine to own, but probably not in most cases. He's just so inconsistent and so infuriating to watch, and I imagine infuriating to coach as well. While Solly Hill played and did his usual nothingness, 5, 3, and 2 in 33 minutes for Solly. What about Bud Hield, though? 15 minutes for Bud, 16 points with 4 triples, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist. Still had some very weird misses, some air balls, but probably the best shooting night in terms of overall output and percentage, going 6 of 12 from the field and hitting those threes, but not doing much in the other areas. My issue with this is that he'd been getting so few minutes before, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, because he hadn't been playing well. And in the end, he did play well in this one, but this, to me, was pre-planned. Alvin Gentry was going to play him big minutes because he was back in Oklahoma. And that is just a very weird way to coach, because the fans want to see Bud. Like, Hield was hitting threes and the crowd was cheering him for the opposition. This was pre-planned that he was getting these 15 minutes. We'll see if the fact that he did well in this game is enough to keep him in the rotation ahead of some of these other players like Langston Galloway, who had his minutes reduced, or Frazier, who had his minutes reduced. But it's a weird way to coach, to have that pre-plan and say, because he's going to the place where he played college, we're going to give him extra run. I don't know. If I'm wrong, let me know if you think that's not a weird thing. It just seems like a weird thing to me. The Oklahoma City Thunder. Russ, 5 straight triple-doubles. He's good. 28, 17, and 12. 2 triples and a steal. Both percentages were pretty negative here in this game. He was 6 of 9 from the line. He was 10 of 23 from the field, but still getting those counting stats, exactly what you want from Westbrook. And Enes Kanter played 30 minutes because Steve Adams went down with a sprained ankle. Now, Adams lasted just 9 minutes for 7 and 3, and Kanter stepped up and played 30. 17 and 10 for Kanter, a steal, 2 blocks, even getting the defensive numbers happening. Uncharacteristically, he was 3 of 6 from the line, but normally you can count on big percentages from Kanter, and if he's going to have to play big minutes, we're going to see some big numbers. Joffrey Lavernier started the second half, but he didn't really last that long before Kanter came in, and Kanter's going to be the guy that benefits the most, and he will probably play 28 to 30 minutes on these nights if Adams has to miss. The Thunder do play again on Monday, so I'd be doubtful that Adams plays in that. So you're going to get some action to get some Kanter in there. As for Lavernier, he played 18 minutes. He had 4 and 11, nothing else there. That opens up him to become a deeper league stream for whatever time Adams is out, if Adams even misses any time. But Adams was not able to return to this game at all. So you'd have to think he misses at least one game, enabling Lavernier and Kanter to have some extra fun. Andre Robertson is playing fantastically. 13 points for Robertson. He hit a 3, but importantly, another 2 blocks and a steal. He's getting over a steal and a block per game. He's hitting more threes. He gets out in transition on these Westbrook outlet passes, and he's scoring a little bit more as well. He's a better than decent rebounder for his position. It's coming to the stage where you have to not consider him a must-own guy, but he should be looked at pretty closely in most 12-team leagues, because of these defensive numbers that he's putting up, which becomes so rare and so valuable. Jeremy Grant struggled. Victor Oladipo struggled a bit as well. I don't know what's going on with his free throws. They are beyond horrible this season, when he's been a very reliable free throw shooter in the past. He was only 1 of 8 from 3, and he was only 2 of 7 from the line. And he only hit 6 of 15 from the field. So a really horrible percentage night from Oladipo. Still ended up with 15, 5, and 4 with the steal. So the stats were there, just those percentages were poor. And if he gets those free throws back to what we've seen from him over the first 3 years of his career, then we're talking about a guy who's going to be sitting pretty comfortably inside the top 30. For now, he's just out of it, but it just feels like it's going to be something that has to change. The next game we take a look at is we look at the Sacramento Kings and the New York Knicks. Talked about Boogie already. Rudy Gay, 22, 9, and 4, 3 steals and 2 triples. Been a real surprise packet, I guess, if you drafted him, because you were able to get him pretty late. He was hanging around to the 70s and 80s, and he's easily returning that value at the moment. And the let's limit Darren Collison so Ty Lawson can play situation fix itself today. I don't know if that'll be something that continues moving forward, but we got 39 minutes of Collison. We got 9 minutes of Lawson. Lawson was terrible. There's no reason to own Lawson in a 12-team league. And Collison, 13, 3, and 6 with 2 steals in 39 minutes is not fantastic. But even when he was getting these limited minutes and playing like 30 minutes, 28 minutes, he was still a top 70 player. So he's got the potential, if he can get this 34-minute role, maybe even if it's 32, to challenge for a top 50 spot this year. So that'll be pretty nice if you manage to snag him late in a draft. Matty Barnes' production is all over the place. His shot was terrible as well. 1 of 11 for Barnesy, 2 and 3 with a steal. And Omri Caspi comfortably back in the rotation now, just in this low 20s role. He had 20 here, 6 and 3 with 2 steals. Yeah, look, if Caspi's getting 28, 29 minutes, then we're talking about him as being someone you got to own. In this sort of role where he gets 20 minutes and he's sort of splitting time with Matt Barnes, both of them restrict themselves to 14-team leagues, maybe even 16-team leagues, depending on the strength of your squad. We also got 23 minutes of Willie Cauley-Stein. He's not doing a huge amount with any minutes that he's getting this season, and Aaron Aflalo struggled again. The Knicks, Derrick Rose. Big Derrick Rose night, lacking in the standard areas. 20 points, 6 boards, 6 assists. No threes, no steals. And that's what always holds back Derrick Rose's overall fantasy value, is the lack of steals, the lack of threes. He was great with his shooting, 9 of 14, and he looked a lot more explosive. And 20 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists is great if you're in a 3-category league. But the problem is he's just not contributing, or doesn't contribute in those other areas, and that's what's always going to limit his fantasy appeal. And I mentioned before that Joakim Noah was back. He played 25 minutes, and he's terrible. You got 3 more years of this, Knicks fans. 2 and 5 in 25 minutes. It moved Kyle O'Quinn back to the bench. O'Quinn only played 14 minutes, but blocked 4 shots. He had 9 boards in 14 minutes. So you look at someone that has 9 boards and 4 blocks, and you go, you know what, that's great, that works. It's not going to happen all the time, but he is a guy that over his career has shown an ability to rack up stats in limited playing time, and with Noah struggling, and O'Quinn, I'd say elevating himself over Billy Hernan Gomez as well in this rotation. He's a name to watch. He's not a 12-team league guy, though, just because if you're getting 17 minutes a night, I don't expect you to have 9 boards and 4 or 13 minutes a night. I don't expect you to have 9 boards and 4 blocks moving forward. It's going to take a longer-term injury for me to really consider Kyle O'Quinn to be someone to own. Justin Holiday had 8 boards and 3 steals in his start in place of Courtney Lee, but even in that situation, he is a stream option, really. That's it. Mallow, 20 points on 20 shots. Not a lot else happening for Mallow. Got a busted up lip as well that he had to leave the court for at some point, but he's going to be fine moving forward. The last game of the night, we're talking about the Indiana Pacers and the Los Angeles Clippers. Paul George was back, CJ Miles was back, Kevin Seraphin was back, except Kevin Seraphin didn't play. I don't know why they didn't put him in the rotation, but they gave all the backup center minutes to Al Jefferson and didn't play Seraphin, whereas before Seraphin's injury, Seraphin was playing 16, 17 minutes and Jefferson was playing 7 minutes. Interesting to see how Nate McMillan deals with that moving forward. Jefferson only the 6 and 4 in his 18 minutes, not in consideration for most leagues. As for Paulie George, they said he was coming back on a minutes limit, still played 34, so what's he going to play out before that? 36, 38? Not too much of a minutes limit there. 16, 7 and 5, 3 steals and 3 triples. Paul George owners are happy. It is going to impact guys like Miles Turner, which it did. He went 12, 3 and 3 with a steal and a block, and Jeffy Teague dropped off as well, going 15, 1 and 3. So that high level of performance from Turner and Teague that we were getting, it's going to drop off. Now, I still believe Turner's a very good player and Teague's a solid player, but they are going to see a reduction in their numbers. Monte Ellis, 14 and 4, not a great night, but Rod Stuckey stuck his hand up and said, you know what, I'm here, look at me. That's great, Rod. 16, 3 and 3 in 21 minutes, but it came on 7 of 10 shooting, which is unrealistic for Stuckey. He's going to require a couple of injuries to become a 12-team league guy. This is a great night, but let's just chalk it up to something that occasionally happens and look at Rod in those deeper sort of formats. Little dog Glenn Robinson III, he moved back to being the 3rd string small forward, played 14 minutes and went scoreless, took 1 shot, so that was great while it lasted. And the fact that he got 14 minutes while Aaron Brooks played 5 and Lavoy Allen is 3 is progress for Robinson. He's elevated himself in the rotation, but not high enough for him to remain valuable in standard leagues. CJ Miles got the 15 minutes, so his minutes will go up probably in the next game. 12 and 5 for Miles on 4 of 7 shooting. He's far from a priority target to me. On the Clippers side of things, disappointing loss for them. They did fight back furiously at the end, but couldn't get it done. Blakey Griffin, 24, 16 and 5, 1 steal, 2 blocks, huge numbers from Griffin, and Chrissy Paul went 18, 2 and 11, and Jordan had 9, 15 with 2 steals and 2 blocks. So that's all the big names there. JJ Redick came back. He had 15 points, all from 3. did nothing else, and shot 5 from 15 from the field. So a pretty standard JJ Redick line. That moved Ray Felton back to the bench, and really everything else on this Clippers team is as you'd expect. The 2 blocks from Luke Marmute is nice, but if you're picking up one of these non-scoring defensive guys, it's going to be Robertson over a guy like Luke Marmute. Paul Pierce still playing over Wes Johnson. I still can't fully get my head around that, considering Pierce just didn't play before Johnson got injured, and then we have Pierce just continuing to play minutes. I'm not really sure of the or even when Johnson first got injured, he didn't play. It was only when Blake Griffin got injured, and I don't think Pierce has really done anything great that's made me think, yeah, he's got to stay out there. We're obviously not considering Paul Pierce in any fantasy leagues at this point. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back to talk the 11-game DFS slate for Monday. We're back. Let's talk the perfect DFS lineups from Sunday. There were only 4 games, so the scores were pretty low. On FanDuel, Derrick Rose, 32.2, and Darren Collison, 27.6. Shooting guards, good luck if you had these guys. Bud Hield at 21.1 and Rod Stuckey at 22.1. Small forwards, Robertson had 27 and Rudy Gay at 41.8. Power forwards, Serge Ibaka 48.4, Tony Davis 67, and DeMarcus Cousins 62.4. So the perfect lineup involved getting 2 of the highest priced guys out there, Davis and Cousins. You could have also had Davis and Westbrook or Westbrook and Cousins. Any way that you wanted to put those 2 high priced guys in, and then it's who's a minimum guy that we're taking a punt on: Stuckey, Hield, Robertson, those guys, and then get those mid-priced point guards like Rose and Collison in there to help get that lineup. On DraftKings, similar story. Collison at 29.25, Robertson at 28.25. Marcus Morris's hot shooting was rewarded with a spot in the team, 35.25. Boogie went for 67.5. Davis had 70.75, and the last 3 spots were held by Hield, Ibaka, and Kanter for a total of 342.75 points. Let's look at the games. There are 11 on, so we're going to be expecting much higher scores. The first one of these games is the Denver Nuggets, and they take on the Philadelphia 76ers. Nikola Jokic, we know, is out. For Philadelphia, we have a couple of guys who are questionable. Jared Bayless is questionable with wrist soreness, and Bob Cove is questionable with his knee. And Joel Embiid, we don't 100% know what's happening. Now, he missed the last game on Saturday against the Celtics as part of the back-to-back resting schedule. This game on Monday is a back-to-back. So we don't exactly know what Embiid is doing. Is he playing on Monday, or is he playing on Tuesday? He's got Denver on Monday. He's got the Grizzlies on Tuesday. I'm going to assume they won't give him 2 off in a row, and I think that he will play. But we'll need to hear more information about that Monday morning, Monday afternoon, to hear whether Embiid is actually ready to go. I know they like to play him at home as well. Whether he's ready to go on Monday, or whether they hold him out till Tuesday. We don't know at this point. So that's something obviously you're going to check, because especially say on Moneyball, where Joel Embiid is priced at a ridiculous $4,000, ridiculous, and he becomes the absolute must-own of all must-owns at $4,000. You're going to want to know whether he's playing, of course. Let's look at the point guards here. Well, this is mixed up because we don't know whether Jared Bayless is in. If Bayless is in at $3,700 on FanDuel, you don't hate it. You also don't feel 100% confident, although playing against the Nuggets is a great recipe for point guards to put up season-high numbers. Bayless has already had a 29-pointer this season at $3,700. He's an absolute GPP guy to take a look at. If he is out, then we go back to Spanish Chocolate, who's averaging 27 points over the last 3 games. And at $4,600, I think you feel okay about that. And again, the matchup really goes in his favor. On the Denver side of things, Emmanuel Mudiay, $5,600 for Mudiay. It's a good spot for him. He's done very well against Philadelphia in the limited time that he's played him in his career. he has an opportunity, I think, to go for 25 plus, but with 11 games on, the trustworthiness you should have in Moutier, it shouldn't be high. Jameer Nelson, his role is cut now that Will Barton's back, so he's a riskier guy to do, especially at 4,300, and 3,700 for Jamal Murray is just not really common sense. Shooting guards, Willie Barton at 5,200, really played well in these last two games. He's only going to really get challenged when Gaz Harris returns, which is not happening just yet. So 5,200 for Barton, even though his salary is up by $400, I can totally see using him. The thing I will say about Barton, though, is he was extraordinarily streaky last season, so he could put together 2 good games and then he could fall off. So this could be a fall-off performance. So bear that in mind, and maybe you restrict your exposure in cash games to Will Barton. The other shooting guards, we're talking about Nick Stauskas, who started the last game in place of Bob Cove. If Covington's out and Stauskas starts again, I would get back on him. He only scored 17 points, but it was fueled by some really poor shooting. He played 33 minutes, which I think is the important stat there. And at 3,700, a guy playing 33 minutes, I'd be very much interested in using Stauskas if Covington is out and he starts again. Gerald Henderson, he's not really all that interesting, but again, he gets a bump if Bob Covers out. He played 32 in the last time that Covington was out also. And Hollis Thompson becomes a tournament-type flyer guy who they might get in, and if he starts hitting his shots, if he starts hitting his threes, he can go off, but it's a rare occurrence. At small forward, Covington, if he plays at 4,500, I reckon he could do better, but we know he's got the ability to go for 40 or go for 45, but not a great option. The Rooster, Danilo Gallinari, is at 5,800. Has just been a little bit under where he needs to be, but not by much. That the matchup's really good for him. If Covington happens to be out, you would love the matchup of getting Gallo in there. So at 5,800, if Covington's out, I think that's a very nice price for the Rooster, who can easily get 35 points without too much hassle. Whereas Wilson Chandler's $600 more expensive, $6,400 on FanDuel for Chandler. The matchup for him is also awesome. I saw a great stat that Adam Maris tweeted out today saying how the Jokic Gallo Chandler combination was like a plus 25 points per 100 possessions, something ridiculous like that. Chandler's been awesome this season. Is he $6,400 worth of awesome? I'm not sure he's quite there, but he's not far off. He's definitely he's more a cash game consideration player than a tournament guy, but he has been fantastic, and he's been quite a reliable guy for most of the year. Ken Fareed at 5,700, he's not really... Look, the salary's coming down, and it's getting more to an appealing area, but his production is also dropping off from those first couple of weeks in November where he was playing out of his skin and putting ridiculous defensive numbers on the board. The Philadelphia power forwards, we're looking at Ersan Ilyasova and Dario Saric. We've got Saric is up to 4,100 now, so a $300 price rise on Saric. He had a big 37-pointer in the last game. I just think with the return of Embiid likely for this game, that's going to move Jahlil Okafor to the 4 a little bit and take maybe 2-3 minutes away from Ersan and 2-3 minutes away from Dario, and it's going to make it harder for him to retain value. Now, he did have a 37-point game, but his average over the last 3 is still under 19. So that shows how poor he was in those games prior. So it doesn't make him a high priority guy. Ilyasova would be great if he was priced at 4,000, but he's at 4,600. And yeah, he had a decent game in the last one too, but the same issues apply to him. Okafor shifts over to the 4, plays some minutes next to Embiid, and it cuts the playing time down for both of these guys. Juancho and Darrell Arthur, they're not really worth looking at. At center, it's Embiid, of course. He's at 6,400. He had 43 in the last game in 27 minutes. We know his minutes limit is now up to 28. He's at 6,400. Even if his minutes limit was at 24, 6,400 wouldn't be a stay away. You have to love him, especially with the Nuggets not having another center on the team apart from Nurkic and him playing like 18 minutes a night. Embiid could really wreak some havoc against this team if he happens to play. So 6,400, it's not the 4,000 that he is on Moneyball, but it's still a very, very good price that I think that you can feel pretty excited about using him. As for Jahlil Okafor, he's at 4,700. I think he's a decent tournament guy. Yeah, look, he's averaging 26 over the last 5, some with Embiid, some without Embiid. And at 4,700, if he gets 26, it's 2 thumbs up. But the presence of Embiid puts a cap on what he can do, so it makes him less appealing. As for Nurkic, the opportunity is here for him. He's just not playing well enough. He doesn't look like he's in the right spots. He looks like he keeps making mistakes. He looks gassed at times. He looks like he can't keep up with full minutes loads. He's averaging under 15 points over the last 3 games without Jokic around. He's at 4,300 Nurkic, and I don't even think I would spend up that much on him, given the way that he's been playing and given the way that Michael Malone has been using him as well. The Cleveland Cavaliers and the Toronto Raptors. It's been a good matchup for the Raptors, who have won their last 4 games by about 100 points combined, just continuing to smash teams. And I did touch on this the other day when I talked about Baba Nogueira and about people talking about Jonas Valanciunas' minutes. It's been just blowouts, and that's been the restriction or the reduction in these guys' minutes. If this game is close, I imagine, and it should be close, the Raptors are favoured by 1 actually, and the Cavs are going to be looking for a win given how poorly they've played in their last couple. It's going to allow these guys like Valanciunas to get back to their 29 minutes, perhaps 30 minutes. It's in Toronto. The total here is 217 points. Mike Dunleavy is back from his concussion, so he is ready to go. Raptors-wise, no injuries to really talk about. Let's look at the point guards. Lowry's at 8,400. Solid matchup against Kyrie. I like using Lowry here. Sometimes he's not in a great spot, but with low blowout potential, with a positive defensive matchup for him, I think he's good to go, and 40 points should feel like almost a minimum for him. Corey Joseph has also been playing well lately. He's averaging almost 26 points over the last 3, but we have to factor that in, and when you're looking at the stats and looking at these breakdowns we've got over on Basketball Monster, you've got to consider that those were blowouts. So he was getting extra run, averaging 25 minutes in those games. And that just doesn't feel as realistic for him to do it in this game against the Cavs. In his last 3 against the Cavs, he's averaging 11 points. And probably numbers in the teens is more realistic. And at 4,200, I think you can do much better if you're looking for a cheaper point guard. It won't be him. Kyrie at 7,400. The Lowry defense is real. Kyrie does struggle against him at times, and even with Kyrie's recent form, he's been okay, but he hasn't been smashing his value out of the park, and this is definitely not a plus matchup for him, so I reckon I'll fade him. DeMar DeRozan at 8,600. Been a little bit down on what he's been doing lately, but if you want some production from shooting guard and you don't want to spend up for James Harden, DeRozan's going to be that guy who's coming in at, say, $3,000 less than Harden. You should feel fairly comfortable with getting 35-ish points out of DeMar and got comfortable 40, 45 point upside here. And it's a positive matchup. Shooting guards have been putting up some nice numbers against the Cavs so far this season. Speaking of Cavs and shooting guards in the same sentence, J.R. Smith, man, he's terrible. He just is really terrible. You know that he's going to go off at some point. Predicting it is becoming very tough because it just doesn't really happen at all. His highest score in his last 5 games has been 15 points, which even if he was minimum salary, it wouldn't be enough to get it done. He's at 36, so he's $100 over minimum. Absolutely, in a tournament, I could throw JR in there and he can come out with 30 and really shoot you up the top of leaderboards. But the sample size of what he's doing since he came back from that ankle injury just makes me think that it's just so far off happening that I just don't want to do it. Iman Shumpert, no. Geordie McRae, James Jones, of course not. At small forward, LeBronald, 9,400. It feels like almost, LeBron is just safe. He's had a couple of disappointing games prior to his last one. He's only averaging 33 over the last 3, but I think that he'll really want to get this team back on track. It'll be a decent matchup, and I think that you should feel confident about getting 40 plus out of LeBron, 45 plus even. As for DeMar Carroll, he's at 4,300, low salary. The Cavs surprisingly have been allowing small forwards to put up numbers in recent times. At 4,300 for DeMar Carroll, absolutely on board, and he's recovered from that horrible start to the season that he had, and his salary hasn't really changed though. So that's a good thing. He's not blowing us out of the water with his numbers, averaging just 24 over the last 5. But at 4,300, with scope to improve on that, I do like the price. Tessa Ross, Normie Powell, these guys aren't probably worth looking at. Power forwards, Channing Frye's at 3,800. We saw his minutes creep back up in the last game. Not quite high enough, but we know that he can get hot and start knocking in threes and get you maybe 24, 25 points. I still don't think he's a great tournament guy. Kevy Love at 78. The salary's dropped by a massive $500 because his form has dropped off, averaging just 26 points over the last 3, 34 over the last 5, and it's definitely nowhere near that $7,800 worth. But he has done well against Toronto in the last few matchups that he's played them. I still don't love it though. I think I'll go a different direction. It won't be the direction of Pascal Siakam, who played well in the last game. He will struggle here. And Pat at 4,400. He just feels like he's a couple of $100 overpriced. He's definitely hasn't got a very high ceiling, and he's got not a bad floor. If you're struggling with some other high-priced guys, which we saw with the perfect lineup, getting some high-priced guys and some lower guys in there, it might work to put Pat in there and hope that he has one of those nights where he has 5 blocks or he has 15 rebounds or he hits 5 threes if you're in DraftKings where you get the bonus points in threes, because he's done that a couple of times this season. But otherwise, I'm not really sold. Jonas Valanciunas at 5,300. The projections really like him here. I think that his minutes come back up after averaging just 23 over the last 3 games. Again, all blowout related. So I think that he can come in here, and a salary at 5,300, that's a $500 drop from where he was. If he gets 26 points, then we're talking about already making value. And it's not that hard for him to... Well, it's not that hard to envisage a situation where he gets 26 points. So I think Valanciunas is fine. There is definitely a little bit of risk associated there. 4,800 for Tristan Thompson, playing back in Canada. He's had a good history against the Raptors and Valanciunas. I think that's fine. I don't think there's much upside in it, but in a cash game, if you're going cheap at center, absolutely worth a look. Bebe Nogueira has been killing it, averaging 25 over the last 3. He's still at 3,900, but you would have to have it in your head that the minutes that he's been getting has been due to his form and Valanciunas' poor form, not a part of the fact that the Raptors are winning games by 30 plus points. I think that he's played well, and I'm a big Bebe fan, as you know. I just don't think that he has been cutting into Valanciunas' minutes, splitting the center minutes directly in half because he's been that good. I think so much of it is because the situation is a blowout. Now, does it mean that Bebe can get, instead of 13 minutes, he can get 19 minutes? He can get 18 minutes? Sure. Do I think it means he gets 23? No, I don't. So he's worth a look at 3,900, but not a very long look. The next game we take a look at, we're looking at the Washington Wizards, and they're taking on the Brooklyn Nets. The Wizards are favored by 5.5, and the total is 219.5 points. Jan Mahinmi has already been ruled out with his knee issue. Trevor Booker, who missed the last game with an illness, he is questionable to play. But the best news for me, almost for the entire season until Cameron Payne comes back, is that Caris LeVert is ready. He is active. I am a big Caris LeVert fan. The Nets got him at pick 20. He would have been a top 10 pick if there were no issues with his foot. I've got absolutely no doubt about that in my mind, and he's got a very fantasy-friendly game. He's a 6'7 guard who can play point guard. He can play shooting guard. He can hit threes. He's a 40% shooter from his time at Michigan. He averaged over 4 assists a game at Michigan. He's a decent rebounder, and he's an okay defender. So we're talking about points, threes, assists, steals that he can provide, and be generally a pretty good shooter in terms of percentages as well. Now, it's not going to really happen for him this season. You're coming off a guy who's had 3 broken foots. That doesn't sound right. He's broke his foot 3 times. That sounds better. They're going to be very cautious with him. They're going to ease him in. They're going to give him back-to-backs off. They're going to limit his minutes. He's not going to come in and say, right, boys, 30 minutes, Caris LeVert, let's go. It's not going to happen. Now, the guys ahead of him, they're not great. Bojan Bogdanovic isn't fantastic. Joey Harris, Sean Kilpatrick, they're solid. But are they a guy that could be a potential building block like LeVert is? No. So if he plays well and he's healthy, we'll see everything ramp up towards the end of the year. But it's just going to be hard to consider using him in any real situation until maybe we get to March. But I just wanted to mention that he's back, and that goes for seasonal guys as well. Let's look at the matchup of the point guards here. Johnny Wall against Isaiah Whitehead. Seems pretty one-sided. Wally is at 9,300. He's playing a ton of minutes. He's averaging 41 over the last 3. In fact, He played 37 in the last game, while Brad Beal played just 30. So that just shows you how much they're relying upon John Wall, because Scotty Brooks has lost faith in Thomas Satoransky, and the other option there is Trey Burke. So it's John Wall or bust. At 9,300, I think John Wall should fairly comfortably surpass 45 points. He is... Look, they could sit him, but are the Wizards actually that much better than Brooklyn? Probably not. So I don't think that you're going to really have a huge blowout situation going on here. So I think you're going to have a fairly solid situation with Wall. As for Isaiah Whitehead, he played 24 minutes in the last game, put up 6 points. That's about all you need to know. Yes, he's priced at 3,700. It's a disgustingly bad matchup for him, and it just doesn't look like I won't be using him. I'll put it that way. Shooting guard, Bradley Beal, 6,900. Did drop off in that last game, and I hope in your seasonal leagues that you were able to sell Brad Beal when he was riding high, because the minutes were unsustainable and the production was unsustainable, and it only dropped off in one game, but I imagine that that'll be more of a running theme. At 6,900, his salary is fairly high. The matchup's good, so I don't actually hate using him. I think there is definite room to use Beal and think that he could get 35 plus here. I don't put it as an absolute lock, and there is definitely some concern associated with it, but I don't think he's a terrible DFS play at all. Shawnee Kilpatrick's at 5,600. The return of Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and the ramping up of minutes of Hollis-Jefferson is limiting what Kilpatrick can do, whether he can beat that sort of salary at 5,600. I'm not sure that he does. He had 24 in the last game. Yeah, he's had some monsters over the last couple of weeks, but with Hollis-Jefferson coming back, it feels harder to spend over 5,000 on Sean Kilpatrick, and that's what you'll need to do on FanDuel. Joey Harris had a big one in the last game. He's at 3,900 and he put up 27 points. Superb value if you knew to do it. I don't think that Levert coming back makes... I feel like Levert is just definitely not the right pronunciation. I know it is, but it just does not feel like it's right at all. It feels like it's been anglicised. I feel like it's a Lever, but I feel like it's just been anglicised, much like Greg Popovich's name. Just add that H on the end so people know how to pronounce it. I don't think that Levert comes in and takes too much away from Harris, but it'll take away enough to make Harris not even really a viable tournament guy. But the last game was very impressive. He's done it maybe twice this year and then goes back into obscurity, so bear that in mind as well. Randy Foye and Satoransky, they're not going to be troubling the scorers too much. At small forward, Otto Porter's at 6,300, had a fantastic season. Great matchup. The Nets are one of the best teams in terms of allowing points for small forwards. So he is in a real chance here. He's hitting all his shots, he's rebounding, he's getting steals. Love Otto. I think he's fairly stable at that price. As for Rondae, who we've just talked about, he's at 4,100. He dropped 27 in the last game on the back of some steals, some blocks and rebounds, which is really his specialty. I don't think I'd want to throw him into a DFS lineup until I know that, they're giving Rondae 27 a night and he feels a bit more comfortable. I'm not comfortable with using him yet, but 4,100 is absolutely not a bad salary to have a crack at him with, given he's averaging over 20 points over the last 5, and that's included some pretty significant stinkers in there too. Bojan Bogdanovic is at 43. You know the story. He can go for 40. He can go for 35. He can go for 12. So tournaments and tournaments only. Power forwards. Markieff is at 4,700. I really like Markieff here. He's had a couple of down games, but the minutes have been huge. He's averaging 40 minutes over the last 3 games. The production hasn't quite been there. I think he's probably more of a tournament guy to have a look at, but he's definitely someone to pay attention to with a real positive matchup and a ton of minutes going his way as well. As for Trevor Booker, if he plays at 5,800, I think it's a fine one to look at. I'm not sure that his tournament upside is really there, but in cash, getting 30 points out of Booker has basically been the story of his season. So, yeah, absolutely fine there. Jason Smith, Luis Scola, no. Centers, Marcin Gortat, Nomi Hinmi out again, so he's going to get a fair crack at things. 6,400 for Gortat. I think it is a fine situation in a good matchup. No worries. I don't know if he's my tournament center of choice, and when you price it the same as Joel Embiid, I would rather have Embiid. But I guess you could make an argument in a tournament. How many people are going to be on Embiid? Maybe let's pivot out and have 2 separate lineups, one with a Gortat, one with an Embiid. And if Embiid fails, which he really hasn't done at all this season, and Gortat comes through with a 50, which he did in the last game, then you're going to be sitting fairly pretty. As for Brookie Lopez at 7,200, you love what Lopez has done this season. But at 7,200, I just don't think he's done that level of goodness. What way to talk. He hasn't been that good at 7,200. Yeah, he's averaging 35 over the last 3. He's averaging 32 over the last 5. It's just not quite there. So I think that he's a fade to me, as is Justin Hamilton. By the time you listen to this podcast, we may know the future of Donatas Motiejunas as well. Regardless of if this offer sheet does get matched or declined, you're not going to have Motiejunas ready for this game. Anyway, most likely he'll be playing for either Brooklyn or Houston at the end of the week. The next game we take a look at, we've got the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Atlanta Hawks. No spread released for this game yet. I guess we're waiting on Paul Millsap and Steve Adams, who are both questionable with a hip and ankle injury respectively. Let's look at the point guards here. Of course, we'll start with Russ Westbrook, who I forgot to mention yesterday, and then backtrack later on. 12,600 for Russ. As good a matchup as you can get. Point guards are really putting up big numbers against the Hawks, and Russ doesn't really need the help. He's going to get 60, it feels like, every night. He's averaging 64 over the last 3. He's averaging 64 over the last 5. His lowest score in the last 5 is 54 points. Now, 12,600 is a very, very big chunk. People are going to be on him. They're going to be smashing Westbrook. I think in cash, you almost have to go with him, because I reckon you're going to have almost 50% ownership in a lot of situations. But in a tournament, it might be better to go in a different direction. Because at 12,600, there is bust potential. And I'm not calling Westbrook a bust, but if he gets 50 instead of 65, then you've cost yourself a lot of value. You look at him and go, okay, 12,600, what is his upside to do more than that? Can he get you $13,000 worth of value? Sure, that's 65 points. Yeah, he can do that. Can he get you $14,000 and get 70 points? Sure, but that might be just pushing the limit of where he can go. Whereas someone like a Dennis Schroeder from Atlanta, who's at $6,000, well, he can come in and give you 40 points, 45 points, 55 points, and his upside is a lot higher. His downside's not quite there, and you have to pair him with the right guy and all that sort of stuff. But it's a theory to consider in a tournament. In cash, it's going to be very hard not to use Westbrook, though. As for Schroeder, the Hawks have been disgustingly bad, but he's actually been playing okay, averaging 34 over the last 5. So I think that he is fine to use against Westbrook. Westbrook does allow point guards in general to put up some decent numbers. Drew Holiday wasn't great today, but missed a lot of shots. But I think that Schroeder at 6,000 feels like a decent bet. Malcolm Delaney, backwards Jay, Samaj Kristen. I don't think that you want to use those guys, of course. Shooting guards, Kyle Korver, let's move on. Victor Oladipo at 6,400. Just been a little bit undervalued lately. I think he's a decent tournament punt guy. If people are not on him, not totally confident with it, though. I think he's okay, but not great. Anthony Morrow's getting minutes. He's not converting it into fantasy points, but he is averaging 25 over the last 3 minutes, that is. 11 points. So it's not coming in terms of fantasy value. And Timmy Hardaway at 37 is getting some extra run with Kyle Korver struggling, but just turning it into 22 points in 25 minutes. And at 3,700, it's okay, but it does definitely comes with risk, and I don't believe his upside is that high. Andre Robinson's at 4,000. As I mentioned earlier, he's flying. He had 27 today. He's averaging 24 across the last 3. The defensive numbers are good, but it's more useful in category leagues, in seasonal leagues, than it necessarily is in DFS. Although we did see his name amongst the perfect lineups a little bit earlier. Definitely consider him, but on a day with 11 games, you'll probably find better. Kenty Bazemore at 48, you cannot trust that in cash. He is down $400 on FanDuel in his salary, so that's a little bit more appealing, but he has just been poor. And Tabo at 4,000. I'm taking Robertson at 4,000 over Tabo any day of the week. For the power forwards, Paulie Millsap at 75. I don't think I'd use him even if he's ready to play. Mike Muscala, the starting hasn't really worked all that well in his favour. He's at 3,700, so a starter at 3,700 who's put up some nice value to start the year, you can definitely consider that and think, you know what, maybe this works and this enables me to get Westbrook into my lineup. So you can absolutely do that and think that, okay, he can get me 19, he can get me 20 points if Millsap happens to be out. If Millsap plays, it's not going to be a great option. Now, Enes Kanter's at 4,900. This is a great option if Adams is out. He's already averaging Kanter over the last 3 games in 24 minutes, 33 points. We could be seeing him get 28. Well, he's played 30 minutes today, so he could get 30 minutes again if Adams is out at 4,900. Yeah, the Dwight Howard matchup is not ideal defensively, but at 4,900, I have extreme confidence in Cantor being able to put up 25 points. Extreme confidence. But we don't know that Adams is out just yet, so I wouldn't be using him in a situation where Adams is playing. Domantas Sabonis at 36, he gets a bump if Adams is out, but it's not enough to make him intriguing in my mind. For the centers, Steve Adams at 47, we don't know if he's playing, I wouldn't be using him anyway. And Dwighty Howard at 7,600, no Adams, consider it. If Adams plays, I don't think that we look at Dwight. He did have 35 in the last game, so somewhat of a bounce back, fueled by a huge amount of rebounds that he grabbed, but he is really, really struggling, and 76 just feels like it's a little bit too expensive. All right, the next game we talk about, the San Antonio Spurs and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Spurs are favored by 5.5. The Bucks have been flying, though. The total is 206.5 points. We don't know if Tone Parker's going to play. He's missed the last couple with a quad contusion, so that does change things around, especially for a guy like Patty Mills. 4,300 for Tony Parker, we wouldn't be looking at using him. But Mills, who's priced at 4,300, he's averaging 24 points over the last 3. He is absolutely in play and then becomes a Westbrook pairing. If Parker's out, 4,300 for Mills, the 12,000 for Westbrook, you're spending 8,000 at both positions at point guard, and that's something you can get away with. So he becomes an option there if Parker happens to be out. For the Bucks, Matty Dellavedova is at 4,200, a nice bounce back in the last game. A neutral matchup that doesn't really entice me that much. I think you can do better, but he fits into that Patty Mills tournament option next to Westbrook with that cheap salary. Jason Terry, Malcolm Brogdon, I don't think so. Shooting guards, Dan Green's at 3,600. Had a whopping 3.5 points the last time out for San Antonio, and has definitely been up and down. The salaries, we're almost talking minimum. The matchup's positive. We can definitely look at Green in a tournament and think, you know what, this might work out. It just requires only a couple of things to go right. But the floor is so low that you can't trust it in cash. Speaking of trusting things, Giannis Antetokounmpo is at 10,100. He's a shooting guard. Fine. If you don't want to use DeMar DeRozan, there's Giannis, there's James Harden. And Giannis, you feel like you're going to get 40 against him most nights. Now, will Greg Popovich be able to stop him somewhat? Yeah, maybe, but it doesn't really scare me off him too much. As for Manu at 4,100, he's been putting up some pretty nice numbers in a nice string of performances, but I don't really think that Manu at 4,100 is going to be your best DFS way to go. Kawhi Leonard, 8,100. Hasn't been playing that well in terms of his fantasy output, 34 points over the last 5, and at 8,100, that's just not cutting it. The matchup here is okay for Kawhi. You would have to imagine something of a bounce back. He hasn't historically done that well against Milwaukee, averaging under 27 points in the last 3 times he's played them. Granted, that's come in 28 minutes, which I don't think that he plays 28 minutes here, but I also don't think that he's going to be playing 40 minutes, which based on his past history would mean what he would need to play to get to that value. In a convoluted way, I'm saying it, in the last 3 games against the Bucks, he's had 1 point per minute, and he's at 8,100, so you want 40 points. He is struggling. He's probably a fade in certain situations to me, Kawhi. Mick Beasley, Tony Snell for the Bucks. If I'm punting one of those guys in a tournament, it's probably Snell, but neither of them make me too interested. And John Simmons and Mirza Teletovic are also small forwards. LaMarcus Aldridge is at 6,500. His numbers have been disappointingly low. I don't really love it. I think it's fine to take a punt on. I think it's a decent tournament guy to have a look at. But in cash, I feel very not ideal at that salary in FanDuel. I'll leave it at that. Jabari Parker at 62 has been playing not great, but the numbers are still actually there. Averaging 30 points over the last 3, which is more than, say, what Aldridge is doing. And at 6,200, that's pretty much where it needs to be, and he hasn't been playing that well. So I think he's got some decent upside. The matchup's not great, but he's got room to grow based on what he's been doing. So Jabari is not a terrible option. At center, Pau Gasol is at 6,100. He's obviously, minutes are all over the place. He's been great against Milwaukee in the past. Their centers do allow a lot of points. It's a risk with Pau. I think he's a tournament risk, but he's a risk worth taking, because he can go big. He can go for 40-odd. And at 6,100, that will definitely work in your favor. Having confidence in him doing it is tough. On the other side at Milwaukee, Johnny Henson's at 4,700. We know Jason Kidd's whims, but Henson's put together 3 or 4 strong games in a row. He's actually averaging over 30 points in his last 3 games. He could easily get to 30 again, and he probably should get to 25 plus at least. He's at 4,700. You have to love that. Greggy Munro at 4,700. Less confident there, especially against the Spurs. But far from a horrible pick. But out of the two of them, I'm taking Henson just because of the way that the minutes distribution has gone recently with Henson. But a drop-off could always be coming because that's been the pattern of this guy's career basically every year he's been in the NBA. Let's take a look at the next game now. We're talking about Boston. They're taking on the Houston Rockets. The Rockets are favored by 4.5 points. The total is 217. Trev Ariza left the game last time for the Rockets with back spasms. He probably could have come back. It was pretty late in the game, but we have to check on him. And Nene missed the last 2 games due to rest. We assume that he will be back as well, but I assumed he'd be back in the last time that they played across the weekend, but they held him out for 2 consecutive games. If Trev Ariza is out, it is all aboard Sam Dekker. His minutes have been on the way up anyway. His production's been great, but if Ariza's out, we're going to get a lot of Sammy Dekker. So that is the name that we want to watch for if Trev happens to be out. Let's look at the point guards. Pat Beverley's at 4,500. Yeah, he had a nice 29-pointer in the last game against Denver. But prior to that, he'd struggled to reach value. The matchup's okay, but I'm really not that interested in looking at him. As for Isaiah Thomas, had a monster 52-pointer against Philadelphia. He's at 8,400. Pat Beverley worries me. Pat Beverley worries me a lot. That is a fade to me. You can spend up the same money and get Kyle Lowry, who's taking on Kyrie Irving, and that is a much more pleasant opponent than taking on Patrick Beverley, who does limit point guards in a pretty significant way. Dame Lillard and Steph Curry can attest to that in recent times. Shooting guards, it's all about Jim Harden, 11,400 for Jim. The numbers haven't quite been there. He's averaging under 50 over the last 5, so I'd probably look at guys like Giannis ahead of him. I'd probably look to spend that extra $1,000 and get Westbrook. But we know at any time Harden can go big. The problem here is that Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart, they can throw a lot of different defenders onto him, maybe even try Jay Crowder at times, although probably not. But they've got some defenders who can worry Harden. It hasn't really translated to what the Celtics have done in terms of their numbers this season, but it is a concern for me in fantasy. So in James Harden's fine. The numbers have been a little bit down, and the matchup is far from an ideal one in my mind. 6,600 for Avery Bradley. I would be okay with that if Horford was absent. With everyone healthy, I just feel it's going to be hard for him to actually get to that sort of level. And Eric Gordon, he's at 5,200, been putting up really good numbers, averaging over 28 in the last 5, coming off the bench. I don't love this one for him. I think that there's a risk that they play Beverley a little bit more to try and nullify what Isaiah Thomas has been doing, and that might cause a 2-minute or so decrease in Gordon's playing time, and then make it harder for him to get those 28 points and leave him at, say, 24 or 25 even, which makes it nowhere near as appealing of an option. At small forward, Jay Crowder's at 5,200. The minutes are fine with Crowder. The production's been pretty good. I think this is a really good spot for him, especially if Ariza happens to be out. And Sammy Dekker at 3,900, averaging 24 in the last 3. I told you he'd been flying, and the matchup's pretty good, especially if Ariza is out. If Ariza is out, this is a great option to get these high-priced guys in, to get Westbrook in, to get Anthony Davis in, who's another high-priced guy that's playing. Giannis, any of these guys. Yeah, Dekker at 3,900, if we hear Ariza is out, is going to be a very popular option in my opinion. As for Ariza at 5,500, I don't love using him at that price point. He's been solid, but just not consistently solid, and the salary has risen as well to make me even more weary about using him. Power forwards Ryan Anderson playing a lot better recently at 4,800. I think you can absolutely have a look at him. Big men against the Celtics. We know the story. It's been the same way for years and years in a row that big men can put up big numbers when they play Boston. I said Anderson has been struggling. He's probably more of a tournament guy to me, just given the inconsistencies in his game, but he has strung together a couple of strong performances in a row. Jonas Jerebko, Amir Johnson, we're not touching those guys. As for center, Clint Capella, the same story for centers and power forwards. Big men go well against Boston. His production has dipped a little bit as his minutes have dipped. There's been some unfavorable matchups in there for Capella. At 5,700, I think he can get back to his winning ways and should be able to get you 27 plus fantasy points and possibly exceeding 30. So I do like using Clint here. Al Horford at 7,500. Just too high. I just feel like it's too high. I don't completely hate it, and he's done well against Houston in his time in Atlanta, but it's a different situation here in Boston. I just don't like it. Kelly Olynyk and Nene are not going to trouble the score. Olynyk could, but we just have absolutely no idea when that 1 in 5 performance will come, which does sometimes and most times doesn't. Memphis and New Orleans, the Pelicans are favored by 6, and the total is 201.5 points. We've got the Pelicans on a back-to-back here. Tyreke Evans might be back. We don't 100% know that yet, but he's very close to nearing a return. He's not going to be a DFS option, but he's going to cut into some of the playing time of guys like Hield, like Etuan Moore, like potentially Timmy Frazier, like Anthony Brown as well. And not that any of those guys have got great DFS value, but it does change the landscape up a little bit if he does come back. For Memphis, we don't know the status of Zachy Randolph or Vince Carter, and that changes a lot of things for that team as well. Let's look at the point guards. Drew Holiday is at 7,100. Still too high. Still not going to be using him at that salary yet. He's yet to prove to me that he's ready to contribute quite at that level. Although if you're going to do it, it's not a bad spot when you're taking on Andrew Harrison, despite Harrison's pretty good defense this year. As for Harrison at 4,300, it wasn't quite up to it in the last game, only putting up 18 points. But taking on a Pelicans team on a back-to-back at 4,300, I'm okay with it, but I don't think it's the best one out there. I think his salary has probably risen a bit too much on FanDuel to make him a must-play guy. Timmy Frazier's out of there, and Wade Baldwin, no thanks. Shooting guards, Tone Allen, 4,100. Love Tone Allen there. I don't really know if there's much tournament upside, but for cash, getting 20 points out of Allen, especially if Vince Carter's out, it feels like it's an absolute guarantee. Not that I'm guaranteeing anything, but you know what I mean. 4,200 for Etuan Moore. He put up 14 points today, so yeah. And the potential return of Tyreke sours that, as it does for Langston Galloway. On the Memphis side of things, Troy Daniels dropped 43 points in the last game. He's averaging 30 over the last 3. His salary's risen now to 4,200. If Vince Carter plays, it is hard to use Daniels. If Vince Carter is out, then at 4,200, I think that he is absolutely worth having a look at. I don't think I would trust Troy Williams in cash because his numbers are fueled by the last 3 games. He's shot over 50% from the field, and I'm not sure he does that every game. So that's going to mean he's a little bit more volatile, and when you've jumped over the $4,000 price point, it makes it harder to use. But if Vincey's out, then he's worth a look. Bud Hield had a nice one today, about 3,500 minimum salary guy. I don't know if I don't really think it continues. Troy Williams at 3,800 is better if Vince is out. He still had 20 in the last game, but hasn't really shown a huge ceiling, or it's not high. It feels like at 3,700, hey, I get 22 points. That's great. That's not bad. But it's not. He's not going to go for 30 or anything like that. It doesn't feel like. But he's a decent, cheap cash game option. Solly Hill is the same price, and he gives you nothing, so he's not the guy to take a look at there. Whereas Carter at 3,900, coming back from the hip problem, I'm not ready to invest in Vince. For power forwards, JaMychal Green has been great. He's averaging 33 across the last 3. But if Randolph's back, that limits his effectiveness. He's at 5,000. I think you could look at using JaMychal in pretty much any situation. And I would even consider it if Zebo is back, but I'd have less conviction about doing it. Terrence Jones at 4,800. Terrible matchup. Terrible player. Inconsistent. Tournament, maybe. But he looks lost at times at the moment, just missing some real easy shots, defensive lapses, and he's not in a fantastic spot here. As for Zebo at 5,400, if he plays, I'm not going to use him at 5,400. But Anthony Davis at 11,900. Dropped 67 today. He's averaging 60 across the last 5. 11,900 is expensive, but as you saw with these perfect lineups, getting a couple of big high-producing guys in there is key to having a high score. So he is one of these guys that you can definitely target. Him and Russ and Jim and Yanni as well. Some other high-priced guys. And Davis has been pretty rock solid with only 1 year poor performance in there that was due to the fact that he had to leave the court for a time with that shoulder issue that he had. At centre, Marc Gasol at 7,300. He's been putting up numbers well in excess of those that sort of salary, so I reckon he is no problem. Now you've got other good centres on the board, obviously with Joel Embiid out there, but I really like Gasol at that price. He could be a pivot away from Embiid sort of player. And Gortat's the other one who I was talking about a bit earlier. Omer Ashik, we're not pivoting towards Omer. Let's talk about the next game, which is the Portland Trailblazers. They're taking on the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are favoured by 5.5, and the total is 216.5 points. Al-Farouq Aminu has been upgraded to probable, so he will likely return, maybe in somewhat of a limited capacity at first, but we'll have to wait and see on that. At point guard, I looked up Mr. Rondo, his name on Basketball Reference, and I was stunned by the pronunciation guide. The pronunciation guide had his name as Rajon Rondo. Now, there is no way that is how you pronounce his name. Rajon Rondo. Now, R-A-H-N is Ran. Maybe that's my Australian accent. But Rajon Rondo. But then someone very helpfully sent me a clip of him saying his own name. And it's Rondo. And the first name is Rajon. No, it's not Rajon. Now I've stuffed it up again. It's Rajon. Rajon Rondo. So not Rajon, not Rajon. It's Rajon Rondo. So Basketball Reference, it's not Rando. Josh, it's not whatever you were saying before. It's Rajon Rondo. Anyway, Rajon Rondo at 6,200 laid a 4.4 point egg in the last game. So that was beautiful. But the matchup against Dame Lillard is fine. He's done very well against Portland in the past. I think that people, and as natural psychology, man, I got you last time and you gave me 4 points. And he's already an unliked guy. And he's a much loved guy for some people and a disliked guy for some other people. I think he's a really good bounce back candidate here who had an absolutely terrible performance against Dallas and should get back to getting 30 plus points here. So I like Rondo in this situation. And every time I say I like Rondo, it doesn't feel natural to me, but I do like him in this spot. As for Dame Lillard, he's at 9,400. I am not interested in Dame Lillard at 9,400. The Bulls do restrict point guard production a lot. Lillard is only of use to me in tournaments. In cash, he is just so wildly fluctuating that you cannot rely upon him, especially in a negative matchup. Isaiah Cannon at 3,500, probably not. And Jaren Grant, probably not as well. Let's look at shooting guards. Dwayne Wade at 7,000. He's been basically getting that value almost every night that he's played. The CJ McCollum defense doesn't bother me, so he is in play. As for McCollum at 7,400, falling a little bit into the Lillard category of being unreliable in cash, he's putting up some decent-ish numbers, but that salary at 7,400 is making me steer clear. Alan Crabb and Denzel Valentine, the other shooting guards, we're not going to be caring about them. Jim Butler at 9,000. Fine. You're getting 40 points out of Butler basically every time he goes out there, it feels like, with 55, 60 point upside at times. Absolutely no worries with getting Butler into a lineup. I think he's one of the better high-priced wing players on the board. As for Moe Harkless, I've been big on Harkless. He's at 5,200. He's giving you 30 points basically every night, but 50% of his minutes are coming at power forward. So the return of Al-Farouq Aminu might just cut him back from playing 33 minutes to 31 minutes, and that might drop him from 29 fantasy points to 27 fantasy points, which makes him less of an appealing option. Now, they could also say, well, you've been playing that well at power forward and Ed Davis and Myers Leonard haven't been, that they're the guys who will lose the minutes so that Al-Farouq Aminu can return, but we don't 100% know that with Stott. So if Aminu's back, it might just cost Harkless a couple of minutes. Still a must-own standard league guy to me, but just for DFS, not 100% sure how this is working out, so I'm not all over it. Evan Turner's been putting up good numbers, don't look now, but he's averaging 30 across the last 3 and 26.5 across the last 5 at 4,700, and that is definite value. Do I want to use Evan Turner? I don't really think I can stomach using him in this spot, although, again, he has been playing well, but there are just so many other options out there that I'd feel more comfortable with. At power forward, Taj Gibson's at 5,900. I don't think Taj's upside is massive, but I think at that price, 30 points out of Taj against a Portland team who does allow some pretty nice numbers for big men, although Al-Farouq Aminu might stop that to a degree. Taj is going to go out there and be pretty solid at 5,900. Nikola Mirotic at 4,000, no chance of using him. He's always got the ability to go out there and drop 30, drop 40, but it's just not happening at the moment, so with a contrarian tournament lineup, sure, his ownership's going to be pretty low though. Not using Aminu in his first game back, he's missed a month of basketball, so I'm not going to really have too high expectations on him. And obviously Eddie Davis and Myers Leonard, they cop a hit to their value. As for the centres, Robin Lopez against his former team, match up beautiful for him. Love him at centre at 5,100. Just another one of these great centre options that are available. And Mason Plumlee's another one of them. 6,000 for Plumlee. You're going to get 30 almost every night that he's out there, it feels like. So absolutely no worries with using either of these centres. And there just seems to be a plethora of centres who look like they'll return DFS value. Charlotte and Dallas. The Hornets are favoured by 4, and the total is 190.5 points. Marvin Williams is out for Charlotte. Seth Curry is still questionable with his knee sprain that caused him to miss the last couple. The Hornets are favoured by 4, and the total is 190.5 points. Point guard Darren Williams at 5,800. I love what Williams has been doing, but I don't want to spend $5,800 on him. As for Kemba at 7,800, the Mavericks at the moment are the worst team for point guards to play against. So I do not want to use Kemba. The salary has come down by $500, so it's a big drop. So you consider it, but I'd like him more at 7,1 rather than 7,8. Devin Harris, no. Ramon Sessions, no. Shooting guard Wes Matthews at 5,000. Bit inconsistent, but the numbers have been okay, especially if Seth Curry is out. I'm okay with using Wes Matthews and hoping he can get me 25 points, which has been the case over the last couple of games. Nick Batum's at 6,800. Big numbers recently for Batum. The matchup is not ideal here against Dallas, so probably a fade for me, and we're not using Jeremy Lamb either. If Seth plays, Seth Curry, I won't be interested there. We likely don't have Dirk Nowitzki. We're not 100% sure, but he's unlikely to play. So the pencil Harrison Barnes at 6,200 is a pretty decent cash play where you should feel confident about getting close to 30 points from Harrison, either 29 or 32, around that zone. He's in play there. Justin Anderson is always a punt option, and even then not a strong one. Whereas Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at 5,200, I just don't really feel that's a confident move to make. At power forward, Dwighty Powell's at 3,800. Which Dwight Powell do we get? Do we get the one that puts up big numbers or the one that puts up a 5-pointer? It's tough to know. At 3,800, he's averaging 21 over the last 3. He's likely to get 20 minutes plus, but he could also get 17 minutes. So he is a risky play without too much of a ceiling. So not a greatly high priority guy. Frankie Kaminsky, 2 stinkers and then a monster. Put up 42 in the last game, Kaminsky, in 31 minutes. I think that the minutes will be there. I think that 4,700 is not a bad salary. It's hard to know exactly what to do with him though. I think he's okay to use at that price, but there is a little bit of a risk associated with it. At centre, Cody Zeller the same price. He's at 4,700. I feel pretty confident of Zeller getting me 25 points on most nights at the moment. I like him here. Andy Bogut at 47. He's also a 25-point guy. You know, playing these extra couple of minutes with Dirk out is enabling him to do a little bit more, to grab some boards, and his assist numbers have increased recently as well. It's been a long show today, guys, because there's been lots of games to talk about. Let's talk about the second last one, which is the Indiana Pacers and the Golden State Warriors. No spread release for this one. It is a back-to-back for the Pacers guys who had all those players return from injury today. Let's talk about Steph Curry, who's at 9,100. He's done very, very well against the Pacers so far in the last 3 times. He's averaged 54 points against them. I talked about the risk of Warriors resting guys. I don't think it happens here. It's probably going to happen in the back-to-backs later in the week. But Steph at 9,100 is a fine guy to look at without it being a brilliant play for DFS. Jeffy Teague at 7,200. The return of Paul makes him, the return of Paul George, you know what I mean, makes him a little bit harder to use, so probably a fade for me. And Shawnee Livingston's not worth looking at. Klay Thompson at 6,200. I think Klay's absolutely fine at that price. Sometimes the bad shooting does really bother you, but even in the nights where he shoots poorly, his lowest score in his last 5 has been 25 points. So he's not completely butchering a lineup, and he can go 40. He can go 50, even if the night really falls his way. 4,800 for Monte Ellis. That is a no from me. And Ian Clark and Rod Stuckey. You know, Stuckey put up a good performance today, but do I really trust that happening again? No, I do not. At small forward, Durant's at 10,400. Sure, you should be able to get 50 out of Durant. I know Paul George is a good defender, but I I believe in Durant. As for George at 8,300, I don't like that. Being out so long on a back-to-back against the Warriors, he's been a bit disappointing anyway this season and not really worth the 8,300. So that's a no from me for Paulie George. CJ Miles, Glenn Robinson III, Andre Iguodala, other small forwards, probably not worth considering. I like Draymond at power forward. Really positive matchup against Thad Young. He's at 8,000. You should feel relatively comfortable about approaching 40 points for Draymond. This game overall, despite some of the big names in it, their salary to points ratio is not all that high. Thad Young at 5,200. I don't love it here at all. Let's talk centers. Miles Turner. The centers normally get embarrassed against the Warriors. That does happen. Now, Turner's had a pretty good record against them, averaging 45.6. I think he's played them twice, maybe. I think he's played them twice. But, yeah, look, it's always tough to play a center against the Warriors, and I'll use that as basically an unwritten rule. Zaza, nah, we're good without Zaza. The last game of the night, we're talking about the Utah Jazz, and we're talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. No spread release for this one just yet for this game. Now, Jose Calderon is out with his hamstring issue, and George Hill is out for the Jazz, and Larry Nance is questionable with a knee contusion. Let's talk about the players who are there. So Hill is out, so we're probably going to get Exum starting, and we're probably going to get Shelvin Mack providing most of the fantasy value. Shelvin Mack's at 3,600 makes a solid pairing with a Westbrook in a tournament because that's basically minimum salary. He's averaging 19 points Mack across the last 3 in 26 minutes, and with an upside of getting 22 or 23 points, it's a fine pairing. You get that with Westbrook 63, you get 22 out of Mack, and you talk about 85 points out of your point guards. I think you should be relatively happy with that, and it's a positive matchup for him as well. Now, we would have to assume that Marcelo Huertas starts for the Lakers with Calderon out, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be a useful fantasy player. So steer clear of him. As for Exum, same thing. If he starts, it's hard to rely upon either of those guys. Louis Williams was fantastic in the last game, but that's not influencing us using him. He's been fantastic across multiple stretches of games. And with another guard out at 5,500, Lou Williams is one of the best options on the board, I believe. Jordy Clarkson's been a little bit up and down, but he is absolutely fine at 5,200 as well. And you just think he should get some more ball handling opportunities with another point guard going down. As for Rod Hood on the Utah side of things, 5,500, he's back from his hamstring issue. He dropped 27 in his return, and at 5,500, that's value right there. And I think he can get better. So he's fine to use at 5,500. Also, for the small forwards, Brandon Ingram at 41. He's starting. He's playing a lot of minutes. It's not translating into huge fantasy points, but I think that you could look at Ingram here and say, I'm going to get 22, 24 points out of him, and that would be plenty at his $4,100. So love him. Love the minutes he's going to get. Luol Deng played 36 minutes in the last game. He's at 3,900. He's a little bit of a sneaky tournament pick to me, Deng, just because with all the guys falling out of the backcourt, he might be forced into some extra action, especially if Larry Nance is out and they have to play him some more at the 4. So have a look at Deng if we have Nance out of action. As for Gordie Hayward, he's almost at 8,000 now, 7,900, averaging a whopping 45 over the last 3. The matchup is okay for Hayward. I think that you should feel relatively confident about putting him in at that sort of a salary. Joey Ingles, Joey Johnson, they're back into bench roles now with Rod Hood returning. At power forward, Larry Nance at 4,200. Yeah, probably not for me. And same with Julius Randle at 61. The salary's dropped by $500, so that's a positive, but it's still not all that interesting for me to use Julius Randle. Whereas Trey Lyles at 4,200 has had some decent games, but even when he has a decent game, 23 fantasy points, and it's not really high ceiling. He's not getting big minutes. He's not a guy I'm interested in, nor is Boris Diaw, who's been the starter. At center, Rudy Gobert at 6,900, does great stuff. Has been great against the Lakers in the past. This matchup's fantastic for him, but 35 points, it just doesn't feel like it's an everyday occurrence for Gobert, so he's not in my list of centers that I want to look at. Tim Mozgov, though, at 3,600. If we have Nance out, they're going to have to play Mozgov some extra minutes, and at 3,600, he could easily exceed 20. He had 20 in the last game in 27 minutes, and I think he can be better than that. So he is a very cheap option at center that you could consider. we're done. That is it for this podcast, guys. I'm going to take a look now at the picks of the day before we wrap things up completely. On FanDuel, Shelvin Mack at 3,600, Rajon Rondo at 6,200, and Johnny Wall at 9,300. Tony Allen at 41, Louis Williams at 55, and DeMar DeRozan at 86. Small forwards, Ingram 41, Porter 63, Jim Butler 9,000. Power forwards, Markieff is 47, Taj is 59, and Draymond 8,000. And the centers, Johnny Henson 47, and Joel Embiid 64. On DraftKings, Mack is 38, Schroeder 61, and Johnny Wall 89. Shooting guard, Tony Allen 41, Lou Williams 58, and Jim Harden 11,800. Small forwards, Brandon Ingram 45, Willie Barton 51, and Kawhi at 8,000. Much prefer him on DraftKings and FanDuel. Markieff at 5,000, Porter 66, and Draymond 8,000. And the centers, Cody Zeller 44, Pau Gasol 53, and Anthony Davis 11,000. For the Australians, on Moneyball, Patrick Beverley, minimum salary. Love it at minimum salary. Rondo's at 61, and Johnny Wall at 86. Shooting guards, Will Barton 4,000, Lou Williams 55, and Jim Harden 11,100. Small forwards, Ingram's at 38, the Roosters at 5,200, and LeBron's at 8,800. Power forwards, Johnny Henson 37, one of the must-play guys on the board. LaMarcus is at 59, so didn't love it at 65 on FanDuel. $600 cheaper, I'm all aboard on Moneyball. And Davis at 11,000, and the centers, here we go. Joel Embiid's at 4,000. Smash that if he's playing, smash it hard. And Pau Gasol 5,600. On DraftStars, Andy Harrison's at 5,000, that's minimum. Lou Williams 82, and Lowry's at 15,150. Shooting guard, Troy Daniels is minimum 5,000. Shawnee Kilpatrick's 87, and DeMar DeRozan is 14,200. Small forwards, Troy Williams is minimum. So we've got the minimum Memphis trio, Harrison, Daniels, and Williams all at 5,000. I wouldn't recommend using all three of them, but using a couple of them will enable you to get some of these high-priced guys in. Wilson Chandler 10,600, and Yanni is at 15,900. Power forwards, Frank the Tank at 7,800, Jabari is at 98, and Draymond is at 14,250. And the centers, Johnny Henson 55, Embiid is at 11,550, and Tony Davis round things off at 19,150. We are done. Don't forget, check out today's sponsor, Mack Weldon, and use the promo code LOFB for 20% off your order. Check out the Locked On Podcast Network and Basketball Monster. We are done, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Draymond Green.